Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. Back with us is former Representative Tom Malinowski. Usually, Tom, we talk to you with your foreign policy expert hat on, but today we want to talk to you about rescission, which we are hearing a lot about this week. Give us the legal framework for what we're talking about. Isn't there something called an Impoundment Act? Doesn't the president have to spend money? Explain.
Really, Jen, we're going to be like using words like rescission that are like,
Yes,
you know, um,
legal words. Yeah.
legal words. So it sounds like a very technical debate that's going to be consuming the Senate this week. That what
Yes.
they will say is we are debating a presidential budget rescission package. It's actually a really, really fundamental debate about the power of the purse, whether Congress has the power of the purse or the president, Donald Trump, has the power to just say, I don't care what Congress said I needed to spend, I'm going to spend whatever I want on whatever I want. So let's back up a little bit. The Constitution is pretty darn clear that the Congress decides what the budget of the government, of the federal government is, down to every agency and office and purpose. The executive branch, the president, then has to spend the money that Congress appropriates. If Congress says Department of Education needs to spend $100 on paper clips, the Department of Education then has to spend $100 on paper clips. Maybe it can decide the shape of the paperclip or the color of the paperclip or what it's going to use the paperclip for, but they got to spend the $100 if that's what Congress said. And that pretty much held for most of American history, with a few very minor exceptions. In the 1970s, Richard Nixon, being himself, decides to test it and says, no, I can withhold congressionally appropriated funds. And so Congress passed a bill called the Impoundment Control Act. Impoundment is when the president does this, when he impounds money that has been appropriated for a particular purpose. And what that bill says is that in general, presidents still can't do this, but there might be some circumstances where it's reasonable. Maybe, you know, we've invented a new way of holding paper together and paper clips are no longer needed, and the president says we can save some money. But in those cases, the president has to go back to Congress and ask permission to not spend the money in that fiscal year that was appropriated. And so then fast forward a few decades, and Trump comes along and Elon Musk comes along with his chainsaw and starts trying to eliminate large chunks of the government of the United States, including parts that Congress specifically said you got to spend money on. And at first, Trump and his people say, you know what, to hell with you, we just don't have to follow that rule. We're just going to do this. But they start hearing from some Republicans in Congress who are uncomfortable with the president acting this much like a king or like a dictator. And they tell the White House, you know what, just use this law. Come to us for at least a few of the things that Musk tried to cut and ask our permission. And don't worry, we control this place. We'll give you permission. And so that's this rescissions package. It's Trump asking Congress for permission to not spend about $9 billion on several items that they don't want to do. One of them is public broadcasting, NPR, PBS. This is money for Sesame Street, for Elmo, and for all that good stuff. Number two, some of the USAID funding that was cut, including for PEPFAR, the president's anti-AIDS, anti-malaria initiative that under George Bush saved millions of lives and continues to save lives around the world. It passed the House just barely. A couple of Republicans actually voted with the Democrats. And the Senate, it's interesting. It's absolutely not a lock that the Senate is going to pass this as the president requested. And so there's an opportunity here to say, actually, Congress, even this Congress, is going to assert some of its powers back.
Now, just to underscore something, we're not talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that Musk said he saved. We're talking about $9 billion, which tells you, first of all, about really his success in eviscerating parts of the government, be that as it may. They've now come back to the Senate. Can the Senate take its own sweet time in doing this? Are there time limits? What's the time frame here?
So another important piece of the Impoundment Control Act, if the president uses it and asks permission to not spend the money on the paper clips or to save millions of lives around the world, Congress has 45 days to approve that request. And the responsibility is on the president's supporters to bring it up in both the House and the Senate and to pass that permission slip within those 45 days. If either house fails to do that, then the impoundment becomes illegal. And so the House did it, but if the Senate doesn't do it in time, and that means by midnight on Friday, then it's done. And officially, under the laws of the United States, unquestionably, these rescissions or cuts that Musk made on those specific parts of the government are unlawful. So the burden is on them. This is the case where it's not, the burden is not on the Democrats to pass something. It's on the Republicans to pass something. And unlike the big ugly bill, they can't take their sweet time. They have until the end of Friday.
Got it. Now, what's the time frame? What triggers the impoundment requirement? Is it when Musk says we're not spending the money? Are they within that time frame? Do they have any difficulty with that?
So the clock begins when the president makes the request, the rescission request. And so it's 45 days, and that's the clock that runs out on Friday. If they're successful, so let's talk about the implications of this. If they're fully successful and the Senate just approves what the House did, obviously that's the worst case scenario, because then they'll be emboldened to make more of these rescission requests to legalize as much of what Trump did as possible. And of course, if it's legalized by Congress, you can't challenge it in court. But there are a couple of other possible outcomes. There are a number of Republican senators who've expressed opposition or concern about some pieces of this. So there are rural Republican senators who actually like NPR and public radio because it provides a service that no one else is providing in some of their communities. There are others, Susan Collins in particular, who have deep concern about the cuts to PEPFAR and to some of the foreign aid cuts. So what will these senators do? They could taco, very possible, and just pass the whole thing. They could say no, in which case Friday at midnight, this expires. Or they could try to get an amendment passed to change it so that, you know, maybe you cut some things, but not the PEPFAR or not the NPR or PBS, in which case it has to go back to the House. And then the House has to pass this less satisfying from a MAGA point of view version of the bill by Friday. And if they fail, the whole thing collapses. Or if they accept the changes, it's not great, but at least Congress will have asserted that some of what Trump and Musk did was wrong. And I think then Trump has to respect that. And then, like, you know, if this does fail, if Trump fails to get what he wants, then the question is what the administration does. You know, do they obey or not? If they don't obey, then at the very least, our position in the courts becomes 10 times stronger, even than it is today. Because they've gone through all this process and Congress would have declined to approve some of the cuts.
Now, just went through this big fight about next year's budget, about what they were going to cut, what they were going to spend. If the president keeps doing this, what's the point of even having a budget? What's the point of having all of these negotiations? What's the point of keeping the government open? It seems as if they have served up an argument to the Democrats to say, hey, you guys can vote for whatever you want. It doesn't really mean anything because Trump is going to come back and make you guys cut a bunch more stuff.
Yeah, well, I think Trump would kind of like us to just say, what's the point? Might as well just give him the power. And so it's another step in his consolidation or attempted consolidation. In this case, he may fail, of unlimited power. It's another episode in the humiliation of Washington Republicans giving up the power that they spent all of that money running for office to try to have. But there are a lot of opportunities for the good guys here. I mean, we could block all of it. We could block part of it. We, again, strengthen our case in the legal challenges, many of which have been succeeding anyway. And very importantly, we force the Republicans to vote again on these cuts.
Exactly.
So, you know, if they do vote to kill Sesame Street, that's something that people can run on in a year and a half. So I love members of Congress using these privileged procedural opportunities to either block Trump or to force the Republicans individually to own the worst things he's doing.
Now, if they push this forward, Senator Schumer has said he's not going to help them keep the government open. What does that exactly mean? And why do Republicans need Chuck Schumer to keep the government open, given the fact they've just passed this other big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, well, they don't want to use, you know, I mean, they need the Democrats on anything they want to pass in the Senate other than these reconciliation bills, which they can only do a very limited number of times. So generally, to pass the regular appropriations bills, there's some compromising that goes on to get enough of the minority party to get to 60 votes in the Senate. And ordinarily, I think even under these circumstances, the Democrats would want to have a good faith process. But what Schumer is saying rightly is that if we do work with you to pass a budget and the president ignores it anyway, and you guys just give him a blank check to ignore the budget, not to spend money that we force him to spend, then what's the point? Why should we work with you to pass that budget? It's a very good point, and I hope he sticks to that. So that's another point of leverage the Democrats do have right now.
Now, that wouldn't necessarily be for the entire government. The Democrats, for example, could cooperate on some of the appropriations bills, but not on others. So Democrats could be somewhat strategic in which parts of the government they cooperate on and which they don't. What do
They could not cooperate on DHS, for example.
Yes, that would be a very good starting point. Why do Republicans kind of agree to allow themselves to be led around when in the end they still have to vote for the rotten stuff? When it came right down to it, it's their name that was on that big bad bill, and now it's their name that is on arguably going to be some of very unpopular cuts if you're a Kansas senator, for example, whose people rely upon NPR for weather reports and the rest. They seem to be kind of setting themselves up again and again by not confronting Trump, by not asserting their power to the purse to begin with, and then they get stuck with the leftovers and get blamed anyway. It doesn't seem to be a great approach.
It doesn't seem like they're having a lot of fun in their jobs right now.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm not very sympathetic.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, you know how fear plays on the minds of politicians and that
Yes.
primaries come before the general election. And by the way, on this rescissions package, which again sounds very technical, the White House has said that it will go to the mat and defeat any Republican who votes against it in their primaries. And that threat's taken seriously.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it means a lot to them. It would be humiliating for the White House to lose this vote fully or even partially.
So last question for you. If you're a voter, if you're a member of the Democrat Party, what's the best argument you could make to a Susan Collins or to Elisa Murkowski or someone not to vote for this? What's the thing that they fear the most or they would be persuaded by the most?
They know this already. It's what we've just been talking about, Jen. It's like, what's the point of being here? Susan, you're the Senator Collins. I'm sorry, you're in charge of the Appropriations Committee. Like, this is your purpose in life, is to oversee the budgeting process of the US government. And we know that you believe in that. I think she does believe in it. What's the point if a president, any president, can take the laws that you pass painstakingly as mere suggestions? So, okay, you're afraid of losing your seat, but what's the point of keeping your seat if your power is completely irrelevant? And so, on this one, I'm hoping we don't have a Murkowski-Collins switch. I think it would be hard for them to do it again so quickly after they were rightly.
We pull it once a year before people catch on. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do it like once a week.
Yeah.
And there are others, because there are different pieces of this rescissions package that will be offensive to different senators. So, this will be interesting to watch. And then maybe like one other thing that will sound maybe even more technical, but it's in the same vein. So we talked about the Impoundment Control Act, right? Like, the president's supposed to ask permission if he doesn't want to spend the money. What if the president doesn't ask permission? So there's another provision of the Impoundment Control Act that says if he doesn't do it, the Comptroller General of the United States and the office he runs, which is called the GAO, the General Accounting Office, which reports to Congress, not to the president. It's like the auditing arm of the Congress, can make a finding that the president has not followed the law, that he's impounded money without getting permission from Congress. And if the GAO makes that finding to the Congress, it triggers exactly the same process, a 45-day clock, where if Congress doesn't act to approve the cut, it becomes illegal. And guess what? The obscure little GAO, more than 45 days ago, issued the first such finding. It was a cut that Musk and Trump made to a grant program for electric vehicle charging stations in the States. And they said, no, Congress said that needed to be spent and you didn't spend it. So that clock's already expired and no one's noticed this in Washington. But that's already clearly illegal, and any state that sues the administration over the EV charging stations will win it, will win its case. And GAO has said it's got 36 active investigations. I think that's right. It's over 30 into various aspects of what Musk has done. So I love that, because it means they're all illegal unless Republicans vote on every single one to say they agree with Mr. Chainsaw.
Exactly. Well, if they didn't know before, maybe they will know now. This is why they need to all watch The Contrarian, because I find out such useful information. Well, it is somewhat dizzying, but you've made it very understandable. And I think the big takeaway is Congress, do your effing job.
Yeah.
You guys were sent there to control the purse, so control the purse. Do your job. Don't let Trump take it away from you. We'll see whether they just like having meaningless jobs or not. And we'll see how that goes this week. But thank you as always, Tom, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens.
We'll see what happens, as Trump says.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.